It's so critical in 2018 that we remember our four freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom from want, freedom from fear, and freedom of religion. This year, at this ceremony, we're going to be celebrating those who fought for our freedom, those who continue to fight for our freedom, as well as their families. We are also celebrating the winners, the high school winners of the 2018 Create for Freedom contest. The Create for Freedom contest challenged the students, through 9th through 11th graders, to create new iconic images and words that would really represent what do those four freedoms mean to us in 2018. Today, we have some special guests in the audience. We have the Create for Freedom finalists and winners. Not everyone could be here today, but we'll be celebrating them shortly. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of some of our local leaders, including Senator Brian Campion and Representative Brian Keith. Here at the podium with me is Colonel Alan Faxon, as well as the Vermont Poet Laureate Shar Dunyord. Without further ado, let's get this ceremony going.
Here they come to our
Carry on.
Festival, military detail, all present and accounted for, sir.
Carry on.
Color guard, present the colors. Detail, just quiet, sir. Detail, ready, front. Detail, ready.
Without further ado, I'd really like to introduce some of our leaders here today. Here with us is the Vermont Poet Laureate Chard du Nord. He was kind enough not only to be present today and to celebrate our young poet winner and finalists, but also prepared a presentation of his own, something that he wrote about freedom and democracy. I think we're all honored to hear this for the first time ever. Without further ado, Chard du Nord.
Thank you, Joshua. Please be seated. It's a great honor to be here today. I'd like to start by just saying a few words about the complementary nature of poetry and democracy. The first thing democracy requires is also the first thing poetry requires, namely imagination. Without it, it's impossible to envision either memorable speech or a state where the genius of its people thrives in both personal and political freedom. Like democracy, poetry is an ongoing experiment that tests its readers' ability to get the meaning of poems, which convey the main things in every new age. One of the main things, if not the main thing, that gets lost in demagoguery is a citizen's recognition of the other as himself or herself. The most sublime act is to set another before you, wrote William Blake in his poem, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. The poet, like the democratic citizen, finds a way to cross over from self to neighbor, self to stranger. But I felt you are an I, you are an Elizabeth, you are one of them. Why should you be one too? Elizabeth Bishop, the poet, wrote in the voice of her 6-year-old self in her poem In the Waiting Room, while identifying her Aunt Consuelo, who was in the next room undergoing a painful dental procedure. In poetry and democracy, we all are one of them too, but only if we exercise our imaginations in acts that are both compassionate and metaphysical, both discerning and fearless, both common and radical. Such transport is human and thereby nation-saving business. Poetry, as well as fiction, serve as literary vehicles for transporting citizens as readers across the transom of self to others, where one discovers that he or she is one of them too, and in so doing discovers the vital democratic calculus of the common good. Thomas Jefferson called the ideal of equality a self-evident truth. Inherent in this truth is the secular belief in the citizenry's collective capacity to wed their imaginations to reason as not only a political ideal, but a safeguard against tyranny. However, this marriage of imagination to reason is always only the start of democracy. Democracy's maintenance is the hard part, requiring continuous political balance on a high demotic wire in which citizens, despite their party affiliations, strive to sustain their vision of themselves in others, despite their ethnic, philosophical, and political differences, and in so doing expand themselves within the matrix of diversity into larger selves that, as Walt Whitman claimed, contain multitudes. Courage serves as the human gyroscope that keeps a people, a nation, steady on the wire. The man who wrote the Four Freedoms that I'm about to read, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, said the following when the United States was threatened as never before by fascist enemies during World War II. The one thing we have to fear is fear itself. Freedom begins in belief and the memorable poetic speech of its definition, and is then secured by perhaps the most difficult freedom of all, namely freedom from fear itself. I would now like to read Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Four Freedoms that Joshua already mentioned, but have a few descriptions as well. The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his or her own way, everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy peacetime life for its inhabitants, everywhere in the world. And the fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. At this time, I would love to present these awards, mention the finalists, but I think Josh was going to help me out with that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Before we move forward, I'd like to mention a few other partners who've really been so important to us at the Four Freedoms Festival. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors, strategic partners, and as they were marching down the aisle, I wanted to give particular recognition to our local Boy Scouts, as well as other veterans who are here today, who really wanted to continue to celebrate and recognize the necessity for the Four Freedoms. Thank you. There were two winners of the Four Freedoms contest, one in the art contest and one in the poetry contest. The winner of the Create for Freedom 2018 art contest is Larissa Weber from Indiana. Larissa sadly could not be with us today, but her work is proudly exhibited up at the Southern Vermont Arts Center, and she and her family were thrilled with the honor. I'd like to invite the winner of the 2018 Create for Freedom Poetry Contest to actually receive his award from Shard Benord himself. If Jamar Beaufort can please come to the stage. And can I ask you to just face forward so we can get a few photos for you?
Look sharp, boys. Black man back to red.
Jamar wrote an inspiring work entitled Silky, and I think that he has a great future ahead of him. I know that Norman Rockwell was inspired first by Roosevelt and then by one of his Arlington neighbors. And we never know how our words in action will impact others. And I hope that Jamar, as you move forward, that you will continue to inspire and impact others. Along with the trophy comes a $500 cash prize. His work will be published in Stratton Magazine, and you get the great case, the trophy case, to hold your award. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
And Jamar, what school do you attend?
I go to Wall Street Academy
And where is that?
in Hudson, New York.
Good. Well, thank you so much. And what grade are you going into?
So,
Good. Congratulations to our winners. There were additional finalists of both the art and poetry contests. If they could come and line up across the front of the stage, those who are here with us today, I'd love Shard to once again shake your hand and give you your $50 cash prize. Here today, we have Kaylee Bushy, Congratulations, Kaylee. Adriana Ennis. Congratulations, Adriana. Holly Hill. Oh, I'm out of order. Taya Oaks. Ben O'Kesson. And Tess Belknap. I'd like to congratulate all of our finalists, and before you leave the stage, I'd like to make one comment. It's interesting that Roosevelt left fear as the last of the four freedoms to mention in his speech, and it's interesting that Shard, in his writing today, should once again focus on fear. Among the Create for Freedom 2018 entries in both the art and poetry contests, what we found was that while no freedom outweighs the other, certainly in 2018, fear was the one that resonated most with our high schoolers. And I think that's something for us to all pay attention to. Without further ado, a final applause for all of our finalists and winners. You may take your seats. Thank you. Of course. Thank you. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Colonel Alan Faxon, who's going to speak further on the four freedoms.
Well, first I was going to try out some poetry, but I think it's my best interest not to with Shard here. No way. The four freedoms. It is so awesome that you all are here today to discuss this, because the four freedoms aren't enduring on their own. You would not have any of these four freedoms if it wasn't for those that served in the United States military. I mean, when you go through the list of four, and you travel around the world like I have, fortunately and unfortunately, you realize how blessed we are to live in a country like this where those freedoms do exist. However, but I will tell you that it is tenuous each and every day. And it's so good to see people here that recognize that these four freedoms are not automatic. If there weren't people on the wire, if there weren't people on watch, these freedoms would evaporate. It's an everyday battle. It's an everyday battle, and we all must fight it, whatever capacity that we are in. What I'd like to do is, I know we have some veterans over here, and we might have some in the audience. I'd like you to, at a minimum, raise your hand. I know how you veterans are. But first, I'd like to look around and see, do we have any veterans from World War II? If you could raise your hand, please. Anywhere in the audience. World War II. Think of that. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Korean War. Anybody from the Korean War? There aren't as many Korean vets, and the Korean vets used to stay in Korea. Behind every hill was another hill. Vietnam, the Vietnam War. And I'm going to talk about numbers later, but to those of you that served during the Vietnam War, thank you very much. The Cold War. Anybody served during the Cold War? And let me tell you, the Cold War is a war that needs to be recognized. There were American men and women out on the wire, in submarines, in the air, conducting missions. It was a war, and we lost many Americans during that time frame. We must recognize it for what it was, and it brought the Soviet Union to its knees. How about Beirut? Grenada. Notice there are many in between the ones that we look at as the big wars. However, you need to know that every day, these men and women that are out there currently serving right now, there's a good percentage of them that are on missions right now that may not even be in the newspapers. Desert Storm and Desert Shield. Any? Do we have anybody? Nice. And behind us, our sound engineer. Thank you very much. How about Operation Iraqi Freedom or Operation Enduring Freedom? Thank you. And there's many other things in between those, such as humanitarian assistance operations, flying at night, sailing down deep. These men and women, we have the greatest fighting force in the world, but because of that, that is why we are able to endure the four freedoms. The other thing that's interesting about the American military, everybody that has served in the U.S. Armed Forces has taken an oath. What's interesting about the oath is, it is not to a king, it is not to a queen, it is not to a prime minister, and it is not to the President of the United States. The oath is to a piece of paper. The oath is to a piece of paper. The Constitution of the United States. The oath is to an idea. Can you imagine that? That you would put your life on the line for an idea. Here is the oath, if you have never heard it. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservations or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter, so help me God. So, American fighting men and women go into harm's way for a piece of paper, for an idea. the number of people that serve in the armed forces is really quite astounding. The Revolutionary War. This bunch of upstarts, colonists, went against the greatest military on the face of the earth. Do you have any idea what the percentage was of the colonists that fought against the British? If I had on this field out here 100 people, only 3 would step forward. 3% fought in the Revolutionary War. That's why their nickname was the Threepers, just 3%. World War II, where we have 2 veterans here, was probably the high water mark of American servicemen and women and numbers. But here, World War II, you had a conflict going on in 2 continents. You had Europe and you had the Pacific, yet you still only had 12% serving in the military. I mean, I think if you look at the history books, you think, I don't know, everybody was serving. 12%, that's all that served. Vietnam, extremely long war, and if you've never been to the Vietnam Memorial in D.C., you need to go. But serving during all those years, it was less than 10% of the U.S. population. Today, with my illustration of putting 100 people out here, and how many out of that 100 are going to step forward in the front and serve in the U.S. military to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, I couldn't even give you the illustration, because currently, right now, less than 1% of the U.S. population serves in the U.S. Armed Forces. So, less than 1% of our population currently serves. They're the best trained, they're the best motivated, but I don't know what causes individuals like men and women to go in at the ages of 17 and 21 and serve your country. But again, thank you very much for doing that. And lastly, to the families. If you are in your circle, in your family circle, you have veterans, be it their children, spouse, grandparents, could you raise your hand? I would just like to look. That's pretty good. That shows you that this is a patriotic community, or at least this crowd is, because a lot of places I go, you see a lot less hands than that. But to the families, to the spouses that have sent off loved ones to war, it's much harder for you than it is for us. I'd like to just take a quick opportunity to recognize my wife, Nancy, who she sent 3 of us away in our family to combat while she lived in Manchester, and I don't think that was necessarily a fun experience for her. So as we say in the Marine Corps, Semper Fi, and may God continue to bless America. Thank you.